which quarterbacks and tight ends can you count on to get you the win in the playoffs? We're about to find out. Welcome back, Fantasy Endgame community. I'm Pierre, he's Chris, and we're here to break down all the matchups for Week 16. Remember, Saturday is when you have your full slate of games, only 3 on Sunday because of that Christmas thing, you know. Catch us live for Start Sit Advice Friday night. We're going to do it again. We're there to answer all your questions. Let's get to the matchups and tell you which quarterbacks and tight ends we like right now. First, here's some players you don't even have to worry about. At quarterback, Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, Justin Fields, Joe Burrow, and Jalen Hurts if he plays. At tight end, Travis Kelce. All right, let's kick it off with a Thursday night game. That's the Jaguars at the Jets. Trevor Lawrence, maybe he has finally arrived because over the last few weeks, he's been one of the top quarterbacks in all of fantasy, but now gets the Jets. Not a good spot. How do you feel about him?
You can't feel great because it's the Jets, it's on the road, but he's on fire right now. Certainly not my favorite QB this week, but I think even in a single QB league, especially if you potentially lost Jalen Hurts, maybe like me, you streamed Deshaun Watson last week, you lost Kyler Murray, I think he's streamable this week.
Yeah, look, typically when you have a match between good offense and good defense, I tend to favor the defense. I don't feel like they're going to put up a huge amount of points, and I really don't feel there's going to be anything like last week with the Cowboys and the Jags. We're having this shootout, a super high-scoring game. It's the Jets, right? It's going to be a low-scoring game, but look, I think Lawrence, based on whatever else is out there in the quarterback streaming, radar, Lawrence is still near the top. He can get some touchdowns at least. I think he's streamable. Evan Engram, he's been great. He's been one of the main beneficiaries of Lawrence really coming through. Is he a guy you have to start now?
I feel like you do. Double-digit targets in back-to-back games. He's obviously a huge part of this offense. Again, not a great matchup, but it doesn't even matter. With the way the tight end is, I think you got to start Evan Engram.
Yeah, again, not a great spot, but I think if there's a position where you can feel better about, it is tight end. He's not going to be on the outside facing Sauce Gardner or anything like this. So I think Engram is a really good start this week. And Zach Wilson, look, say what you want, but just in terms of fantasy points, he put up some last week, 300 plus yards, some touchdowns. What do you think he can do against the Jags?
This is another good matchup for the passing game. Yeah, but can you really expect that again? Maybe. Still not a guy I want to start in a 1 QB league, but I think he's a good start in a 2 QB superflex.
Yeah, there's no way I'm going to entertain the thought of starting him in a single quarterback league. But in a superflex league, sure, based on the matchup, go for it. And then we have to talk about CJ Uzomah because he had been hardly involved, and all of a sudden he broke out, had a couple of touchdowns. Is he the guy that Zach Wilson is going to look to again?
Maybe, but I'm not chasing these random 2-touchdown out of nowhere games. You want to do it, go for it. I'm sitting them.
Yeah, so am I. Look, a lot of people were talking up Ty Conklin last week because, look, he's a guy who had a big game with Zach Wilson before, and who knows? But I'm not going to trust a Jets tight end this week. Falcons versus the Ravens. Desmond Ridder gets start number 2 as a pro. How do you think he fares in Baltimore?
Hopefully a little better, but what can you really expect? No, not starting Desmond Ridder.
There's no way you can start Desmond Ridder as deep as your league is. 2 quarterback doesn't matter. Not great as a passer, and really didn't do a lot on the ground either. There's just no upside, and it's not a good spot for him. You can't start Desmond Ridder. Lamar Jackson, will he return this week? Well, we don't know, but if he does, do you just automatically put him in your lineup?
I think you have to. It's Atlanta. I think if you've got Lamar Jackson this week, he's back, you got to start him.
Yeah, no questions asked. Just said it's a home game. It's Atlanta. If he's good to go, he's a stud quarterback. You've got to start Lamar if he's playing. If he isn't, we're going to see Tyler Huntley again. How strongly do you feel about him?
Not very strongly at all. I am not starting Tyler Huntley even in 2QB Superflex. He's been so bad.
I mean, I will say I don't feel as good, even though the matchup is far better than a guy like Trevor Lawrence going against the Jets on the road. This is at home against Atlanta, but I'd still rather have Trevor Lawrence. Huntley is basically just a guy that you're going to count on for a few points because you know he can run. In Superflex, I'd put him at the bottom of the barrel of these quarterbacks I'd consider, but that's it. And then, what do we do with Mark Andrews? Does Lamar Jackson potentially coming back put him in the must-start territory?
That's the thing. We might have Lamar Jackson back. It's Atlanta. Can you really bench him though? He's been so terrible. I still think you gotta roll with him this week. It's such a good matchup. And look, there's so many risky tight ends out there. I still think you gotta start him.
If Lamar's starting, I'm going with Andrews, no questions asked. I'm taking the chance. I think he'll be fine. With Huntley, it's going to be tough. Honestly, I still think he's startable because, again, depending on who else you got there at tight end, there's not much. I might just roll with him, but it was definitely a lot more questionable. Lions still on the road, this time going against Carolina. Well, we know what Jared Goff does on the road. It's not much. Really, he shouldn't have even had a touchdown pass if not for that crazy catch and run by Brock Wright. Jets clearly weren't prepared for that. Do we still get bad Goff against Carolina?
I think so. This is, Carolina, a good defense. I know the Steelers actually did fairly well against them, but it wasn't the passing attack that had success. It was more the ground game. So, yeah, I mean, barely on my 2QB Superflex radar.
And not even on mine. Look, until he proves he can actually do anything on the road, why am I going to believe that he will? So, no to Goff against a decent Panthers defense. And speaking of Brock Wright, he had that long touchdown. Does that put him on the map this week as far as tight end streamers?
No, this is worse than chasing Uzama's 2 touchdowns because it was literally a tight end screen that he took to the house. I mean, no, you're really risking it here. No way.
No, not at all. Not going to chase Brock Wright's touchdown. And then there's Sam Darnold. I mean, he's been decent. He's at home. He gets the Lions. Where does he rank?
Yeah, just not a lot of upside here. I mean, again, kind of like Goff for me this week. Barely on the 2QB streaming radar, only because of the matchup.
I'll have him a little ahead of Goff, but not much. I mean, like I said, barely in a 2-quarterback league. Buffalo going to Soldier Field to take on the Bears. Well, let's talk about Dawson Knox. Came through with a big game. He's kind of been more targeted the last couple of weeks, enough to make you interested in fantasy. Can he do it against Chicago?
I mean, maybe, but he's caught touchdowns in back-to-back games. That's kind of what you want from Dawson Knox. And when we're talking about a lot of these tight ends outside the top, maybe like 6 or 7, you're really just hoping for a touchdown. He has as good a chance as anybody. I think he's streamable.
He's streamable. That's all you can ask for. If you're hunting for a tight end this week, I mean, you definitely have a lot of upside there in this offense. So, yeah, I'll say he's a decent start this week. What about Cole Kmet? We expected better things from him last week with all those receivers hurting. What do you think about him this week? Would you prefer a guy like Knox over Kmet?
Probably. I mean, Bill's not a great matchup for him. I don't know. I mean, I'd probably still prefer Kmet, honestly, because at least Kmet's involved in getting targeted. But, yeah, I think if you got Kmet, you just got to roll with him again.
These guys are going to be kind of neck and neck in my rankings. I think they're both streamable, but there's risk versus possible reward. New Orleans versus Cleveland. Start with Andy Dalton. I'm guessing Superflex only?
Not even Superflex only. I mean, the big play, I mean, he did throw 2 touchdowns to Juwan Johnson, which is nice, but I'm not banking on that again. And the one big play to Shaheed was Taysom Hill. So, yeah, I'm not starting Andy Dalton.
I mean, there's worse quarterbacks. I'd consider him in a Superflex league, but, I mean, there's not that much upside here. And what about Juwan Johnson? 2 touchdowns. That makes 7 in the last 7 games. How high does he fall for you as far as tight ends go?
I mean, you got to feel pretty good about him. Again, when we're talking about tight ends down in this range, you're just looking for touchdowns, and this guy gets them, and Andy Dalton does target him a decent amount. I think Juwan Johnson, it's a tough matchup, but I still think he's a good start this week.
And until he stops scoring, why not? I think he's not only a good pickup, he's a strong streamer. I'd put him over guys like Knox and Komet because he's definitely been involved, and Dalton clearly likes throwing to him, so I think he's a solid pick this week. And then you got Deshaun Watson. I mean, another letdown game, and it was at home, and it was a good spot. Still a good matchup in terms of the Saints' defense not being great, but are you really trusting Deshaun Watson?
Not in the 1 QB league, no way. 2 QB Superflex only.
Just seems like the ceiling isn't there for him, not this year, so yeah, Superflex only for me as well. Now, David Njoku, he's still been pretty good. You like him this week? Solid start?
Yeah, I think he's one of those tight ends that you got him, you just put him in your lineup, and whatever you get, you get.
Agree. I mean, top 10, probably rest of the season. Seahawks are going to Arrowhead to face the Chiefs. Geno Smith, tough environment, but good matchup on paper. You think he can put up numbers without Tyler Lockett?
Yeah, I think you still got to feel good about him. He's got DK Metcalf. I mean, it's a good matchup. They'll probably have to throw it plenty. I think he's a good start this week.
I mean, if he still had Lockett, I think I would feel really good about Geno putting up fantasy numbers. I think he'd be one of my favorite quarterbacks this week. Definitely don't like him as much, but I think he's still going to fall within the top 12 for me and as far as quarterbacks this week. So I think he's still a solid start. And then Noah Fant, I mean, he's been getting a little bit better lately, but is there enough upside to make you interested?
You know, with Tyler Lockett out, he kind of gets a little interesting for me. Against the Chiefs, I think he's borderline streamable.
All right. That's pretty good. We'll take it. I mean, look, if you're in a spot where you need a guy, he could be interesting. You know he's not going to get a ton of catches, but like you said, you're going to need to find somebody else to throw to. They might have to throw a lot against Kansas City, so I think he's a decent start. Giants at the Vikings. Start with Daniel Jones. I mean, I know the Vikings' pass defense has been terrible, but Daniel Jones?
Yeah, we actually had somebody in the Discord ask about this, and they showed that he has actually been good in like his 2 really soft matchups. But I can't start him in a 1 QB league. That feels too risky. I think because of the matchup, I'll say in a 2 QB Superflex league, he's fine.
Yeah, Superflex only. Can never be too high on Daniel Jones. And look, Saquon has looked like vintage Saquon this past week. I think they're going to go through him. Daniel Jones, ceiling just isn't there. Daniel Bellinger, same thing. I mean, is there a ceiling?
No, not starting Daniel Bellinger. No way.
Kirk Cousins, on the other hand, he's definitely shown what he can do. Man, I mean, I know the game got away from them and the way it happened and overtime, but still, his numbers might wind up being best of his career when it's all said and done. So how high do you put him this week?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the best matchup, but he's at home again, you know, in the dome, perfect weather. He's got this guy named Justin Jefferson who's pretty good. I think even in 1 QB leagues, Kirk Cousins is a good start.
Definitely a good start. I think he's just got to be a top 10 quarterback for me until further notice. Like at home, Giants defense hasn't been great lately. Gotta like Kirk Thuggins. And then TJ Hawkinson. Can't say he's a must start, but he's still probably one of the better tight ends out there.
Yeah, another one of these tight ends like David Njoku. You got him, you start him, you take what you get.
Bengals on the road to take on the Patriots. Mac Jones, I think it's safe to say, is not him. But can you trust Mac Jones this week in fantasy?
No chance. Against a tough Bengals secondary, not starting Mac Jones.
There's no way. No. 2 quarterback, not even. Hunter Henry, no to him either.
Nah, he had his one decent game against Arizona a couple weeks ago. Did nothing in week 15. He's going to do nothing again this week. Not starting him.
Texans taking on the Titans. Davis Mills still the starter there. Can he do something against this pretty generous Tennessee secondary?
I mean, maybe, but not enough for me to put him in my lineups. I'm not starting him in any format.
Yeah, no, you should definitely be able to do better, even in Superflex, 2 quarterback, whatever. Jordan Akins, I mean, he's kind of been coming on lately. Does he interest you as a streamer?
No, I mean, this is getting too desperate for me, I think. Like, yeah, not starting him.
I mean, you should have better options, but look, remember, this Tennessee defense was just completely gashed by Evan Engram not too long ago, and again, give up a lot of passing yards. He's startable in the deep enough format, but yeah, you could probably look elsewhere. And then it's Chiggy time. Chig Okonkwo. Look, I know I keep saying this. If Traylon Burks comes back, then that could affect him, but he's still been fine. Could he do something against Houston?
Yeah, I think even if Burks is back, he's still at least, startable because, again, the tight ends we're talking about here, he's involved. I think he's startable.
He's streamable at tight end. Again, kind of very fringe streamer. Has big playability at tight end, but again, you just don't know what you're going to get. Commanders going to take on the 49ers. Taylor Heineke, I mean, not a good way to end last week's game. He couldn't hold on to the ball multiple times. And now he gets the Niners. Any path to upside for him in fantasy?
No way I'm starting him. Not even in a 2QB Superflex league. Not starting Taylor Heineke.
Against this defense, no, I have a feeling Bosa's going to eat his lunch. No interest in Heineke. Brock Purdy, been pretty good in real life, but look, nothing to write home about in fantasy. Where do you put him?
Yeah, but barely startable in 2QB Superflex. That's only because of the weapons around him and only because, Kyle Shanahan will give him, easy throws, and these guys can always, like George Kittle, CMC, they can do damage after the catch and take it to the house, but barely startable in 2QB Superflex for me.
Yeah, I mean, I like him better than a few of these other quarterbacks, but again, he's kind of just this mid-pack guy in Superflex leagues. That's it. And then George Kittle, I mean, finally went off, had a big game. Do you think that he repeats?
I don't know. This is a tough matchup, and we've seen Kittle, very boom bust this year, right? Has these big games and then does nothing. Very nervous about Kittle this week. But again, I think if you got Kittle, you kind of just have to put him in your lineup and take whatever you get.
It's really not a good spot. The Commanders have actually been one of the best defenses at restricting points to tight ends this year. Can't guarantee he'll do much, but you can't sit him either. If you have George Kittle, who are you really putting over him? Only Travis Kelce at this point. So you kind of have to start Kittle. Philadelphia versus Dallas. Showdown we've been waiting for, but it might be without Jalen Hurts. I mean, look, if Hurts plays, of course, there's no doubt you play him. What if it's Gardner Minshew, which is very possible with that AC injury that Hurts has sustained? So, could you start Minshew?
Not in a 1QB league, definitely not. But I think this Dallas defense has been bad recently, and he's got weapons. I think in a 2QB Superflex league, he's startable, but that's it.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. Look, if you have Hurts and he's ruled out, he shouldn't be your first option. I'll just put Minshew in. I mean, come on. There's several guys, hopefully on your waiver wire, that you go better with. He's okay, but let's not expect him to put up Hurts-like numbers even through just the air. So, Superflex only for me. And then this makes the decision on Dallas Goedert even more complicated. We've been saying if he comes back, when he comes back, you got to start him. But is that the case with Minshew?
I think so. I might like Goddard more with Minshew because, look, Gardner Minshew does some good things, but throwing the ball deep is not one of them. He's got no arm strength. So I think he's going to target Dallas Goedert a lot. I think if you got Dallas Goedert and he plays this week, you start him.
I know you remember this, but last year when Minshew did get a shot to start, Dallas Goedert went off, had a big game. He was the guy he trusted. Of course, they didn't have A.J. Brown last year, but I still think you got to feel better about Goddard than the vast majority of tight ends out there. So pretty much a must start. And then Dak Prescott gets the Eagles defense. Is he still a QB1?
I think so. I don't think you can bench Dak Prescott. If you got Prescott, you're starting him.
I mean, obviously you're not going to feel as confident about him, but how many quarterbacks do you really put above him? I think he still falls in the top 12 for the most part. If you got Dak Prescott, you just keep rolling with him. Dalton Schultz, I mean, Come on. Like, if there's one play that really tilted me last week, it was that non-touchdown that he had when he went to Noah Brown instead. Because I called Schultz a boom, and he should have. But anyways, is Schultz still must start?
Yeah, another one of these tight ends. I definitely, like every tight end, he can do nothing. He could have a nice game, but you got Schultz, you're starting him and taking whatever you get.
I mean, I just wish that Dallas would stop throwing to second, third, and fourth string tight ends instead in the end zone. But anyways, yeah, Schultz, still a solid start. Raiders at the Steelers to round up the Christmas Eve slate on Saturday. So we got Derek Carr again against a much improved Pittsburgh defense on the road. What do you think?
Yeah, never going to start Derek Carr in a 1 QB league. And this is not a great matchup. Steelers have been better on defense. But I think in a 2 QB Superflex league, he's fine.
Yeah, Superflex only. I kind of have a bad feeling about Carr this week. But that said, I still would put him over a few of these other very, very suspect quarterbacks in a deep Superflex league. And then Darren Waller, first game back, caught a touchdown. Do you think he's startable?
I think so, because again, we're talking about tight ends here. Once you get out the top 6 or so, he's got a chance to score. He's somewhat involved. He'll probably be more involved this week. Probably will play a little bit more. I think if you got Darren Waller, you're starting him.
I mean, I wasn't very excited about him coming back. I really wasn't interested in him all season. But if you need a tight end, again, who else out there that you're going to be more interested in? I think he's streamable. And then might be Kenny Pickett back at quarterback. Not for sure yet, but if it is, which is likely, how do you feel about him?
Never starting Kenny Pickett. No format whatsoever. Not starting him.
Now, this Pittsburgh team smartly has gone more conservative on offense. Instead of having him take shots deep to George Pickens, he's just throwing it short, to Deontay Johnson. And they're running the ball because Najee is actually looking better. So there's no upside here, even with how bad the Raiders have been against quarterbacks. Now, if Pickett isn't ready, or, look, maybe the team just decides to go with Trubisky since they won last week. If it's Mitch Trubisky starting, where do you put him?
Same. Not starting him in any format. No way.
All right. I mean, no. Okay, no. I'm not starting him either. And then what about Pat Freiermuth? Nothing last week, really? Nothing, not a single catch? I don't think he was even targeted. He's got to bounce back against the Raiders, right?
Got to. I mean, I will say, if it's Mitch Trubisky, I'm going to be very worried, very nervous. But if Kenny Pickett is back, which I expect, I feel good about Pat Freiermuth. I think, again, another tight end that if you got him, you're just starting him.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I have no explanation, but like you said, if it's Pickett again, look, this is a guy who should be getting targeted quite a bit. In this game, he should have plenty of upside. We can't overreact to last week. I still think he's a decent start. On to the Sunday games. The first one up is Green Bay versus Miami. So playing in the warm weather here, Aaron Rodgers, how does he fare?
Yeah, he's been a lot better at home than on the road this year. Miami at home. Not a guy I want to start in a 1 QB league, but I think he's okay in Superflex 2 QB.
Not a bad matchup, but again, how great has Aaron Rodgers been at any point this season? Superflex, I think he's okay. That's it. And then what about Tua? Definitely better last week against Buffalo. Gets to go back home. Is he a QB1 or more of a QB2?
I think he's like a borderline QB1 this week. Packers do have a good secondary, but he'll be at home. We know he's got weapons. I think even in the 1 QB league, you're starting him.
Very, very borderline, like you said. I think I'll have him kind of like maybe right above Trevor Lawrence, maybe a little below Geno Smith, in that range, below Kirk Cousins. So if you got him, you've been rolling with him, you're probably going to keep rolling with him again. He's a decent start. The Broncos face the Rams. We're going to have Russell Wilson back. It's been confirmed he's starting. So how does he do?
I mean, probably terribly. It's not the best matchup. I'm not going off of what he did like a couple weeks ago for the concussion where he was cooking. I'm going to sit Russell Wilson.
Yeah. Again, that was the Chiefs. That was just I'm going to look at that game as an outlier because that's what it is. That's literally the only game this year where Russell Wilson is throwing for multiple touchdowns and actually looking sort of like his old self. Not buying into it, not starting him. Greg Dulcich, can he be involved enough to do something?
No, he's not starting Greg Dulcich at this. Like, what are we starting Greg Dulcich for? No.
And let's remember, fantasy playoffs, probably the semifinals. Really, you're going to trust your tight end spot to him? I'm not doing it. And then, well, speaking of trust issues, Baker Mayfield, he's going to get to face the Broncos. Where do you put him?
I'm trying to think what quarterbacks I would have below him. There's very few. I'm sitting Baker Mayfield.
I mean, even if you're in a super flex league, I'd rather take a shot at a receiver or somebody to go off, not starting Baker Mayfield. Tyler Higbee, I'll just rule him out too. No interest.
Yeah, not starting Tyler Higbee, no.
And to close the Christmas Day slate, you got Tampa Bay facing Arizona. So let's talk about Tom Brady. Put up numbers, but technically it was, I guess, kind of garbage time as they had to come back after blowing the lead in the second half. Do you think he puts up numbers where he's at least startable this week?
I think so, because it's the Cardinals. They're not a very good defense. The Bucs can't run the ball. You know he'll throw it a ton. You know he'll put up yardage. Not by no means do you have to start Tom Brady, but I think, he's a decent start even in 1 QB leagues.
I really wonder at this point in the season, now that we're nearing playoff time for the actual NFL, and that desperation starts to sink in and they realize they have to win just to hope to make the playoffs. I wonder if Brady does any better. But look, I think he's decent, low-end QB1, but I wouldn't put him over the guys I just mentioned, in that last Tua conversation there. And then Cade Otton, does he do anything against the defense, which still gives up the most points to tight ends?
I know, but with Cameron Brate back, he's not involved very much. I can't start Cade Otton, even against the Cardinals.
He's not a guy, again, in the red zone, not getting those targets. Now Russell Gage is coming on. That's going to eat into his, target share. Yeah, you can't start Otton, even despite the matchup. I'm pretty sure you're going to agree with me here. Trace McSorley, third-string quarterback, if he's the guy, I don't think I feel too good about him.
No chance I'm starting Trace McSorley.
And then Monday night, we got the Chargers taking on the Colts in Indy. Justin Herbert, keeps underwhelming, even in what last week really should have been a smash spot for him, a blow-up game, and it didn't happen. I don't even understand anymore. Does anything change this week against the Colts? Is he still the must-start guy?
I think so. How many quarterbacks do you really feel better than him this week? It's not a terrible matchup. I think you still got to start Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I agree. You still have to start him pretty much, unless you happen to have a guy, which you shouldn't, right? You shouldn't have 2 stud quarterbacks unless you're in a Superflex 2 quarterback league. But, he may not be a league winner, but he's solid, and that's pretty much as you can ask for. A guy you don't have to worry about. And then Gerald Everett, kind of falling lately under those other receivers. Is he streamable?
I guess he's still streamable because, again, any tight end that's decently involved and has a chance to catch a touchdown is streamable, but he's only streamable at this point.
Yeah, I'm really not feeling much from Everett. I feel like there's several tight ends now who've jumped ahead of him in the pecking order in terms of having that upside. I think you can do better than Gerald Everett this week. All right, now you know how we feel about all the quarterbacks and tight ends that might possibly matter for Week 16. What about running back and wide receiver? You need to know those are the most crucial positions. Check out our Week 16 playlist with start-sit advice for there and waiver wire advice, panic videos, everything you need to win in fantasy.